Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, thanks for joining you all. I want to start off with just some housekeeping things. You can ask questions throughout the webinar in the Q&A box, and we will get to those at the end of the webcast. This webcast is going to be recorded and shared with you all afterwards. And we will also be asking a couple poll questions throughout the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I'm Lee Brown. I am the Product Marketing Manager for Pingdom and WPM, and I will be co-hosting today with Katie Cole, who is the Product Manager for Pingdom and WPM. So today we're going to cover what is holistic monitoring, what does that mean, and we're going to talk about SolarWinds Pingdom and WPM together, as well as jumping into the product and talking about and showing you really the web transaction recorder for Pingdom, real user monitoring, and integrating Pingdom data into the Orion platform. So what is holistic monitoring? Holistic monitoring is really about perspective and where the end user is. Are they inside or outside the firewall? Is it a simulated visitor, or is it a real user interacting with your site? And why is this important? Holistic monitoring is important because the more information you have, the more quickly you can troubleshoot the problem and understand the scope or impact to end users. And as WPM customers like yourselves, you already have the first few pieces of the puzzle of holistic monitoring. You're monitoring inside the firewall, and so you can complete that puzzle with the outside and external end user experience monitoring with Pingdom. So what is Pingdom? Pingdom is a SaaS-based client-side web application performance monitoring solution. As WPM customers, you're familiar with what static monitoring is. It's simulating visitor interaction with your site. And the other aspect of Pingdom is real user monitoring, which Katie will show you in the demo. And in contrast to synthetic monitoring, RUM is monitoring actual end users' experience on your site, not a simulation or a web application. So our first poll is launching now, and it's really just trying to get a gauge of your familiarity with Pingdom, if any. And I also want to talk about now bringing WPM and Pingdom together, so how this provides that holistic monitoring view. So while WPM is for monitoring users inside your firewall, like remote employees, Pingdom on the other side of things is monitoring for users outside your firewall, but without the overhead. So you don't have to set up the server to act as the end user in order to get that external perspective. You don't have to set up players or locations. That's what Pingdom is going to give you with our own global network of over 100 locations to test from. And we'll pass it off now to Katie so we can kind of look at this in application in the product.
Great, thanks Lee for that high-level overview of what we're talking about when we talk about holistic monitoring. So let me just go ahead and share my screen. And I'm just going to start with, sorry, let me move these things out of the way. I don't want you to see big gray boxes. I'm going to start with the web transaction recorder. You guys as WPM customers are already familiar with this asset. It's a utility that lets you easily create scripts of transaction flows. Recently, in our last release that came out, 2020.2, the recorder now supports the ability to save recordings directly to Pingdom. So I'm just going to give you a quick example of how that works. I'm going to go to my SolarWinds website. As a company here at SolarWinds, we care a lot about our main public website. This is typically how our leads are generated. We want to make sure that people are able to download the free trials of our products. So I'm just going to go in and I'm going to pick one. I'm going to pick Server and Application Monitor. As SolarWinds, I want to make sure Server and Application Monitor is the flow to complete the download for free trial is working. So I'm going to go ahead and start my recording. And this functionality may or may not be familiar to you. We do have an older version of this recorder. This newer version of the recorder came out in 2019. So I do know that quite a few WPM customers are using our legacy recorder, and this is our new Chromium-based recorder. So it's a little bit more efficient. It has all the same functionality in this last release, 2020.2. It reached feature parity with the legacy system. In addition to that feature parity, it also has that ability to save to Pingdom. So if you haven't upgraded, I would highly recommend it. So here we are. I started my recording. It went to my SAM page. I'm clicking on my download free trial. And I'm going to fill out my form. This is something that you guys probably have all seen many times over. All right. All right, so let me proceed to my free trial. And you can use the same functionality as you do with WPM. I can add in my text validation. I want to make sure that people actually land on this page and they don't get an error. So I'm going to make sure that it says thank you at the end and stop recording. So that process you guys are familiar with. And now comes the piece where we save to Pingdom. This is connected to my Pingdom account using a bearer token. So you'll see it really quickly flash on the screen. There'll be a little box at the end of this. It's going to play back my transaction, and there will be a box where it shows that I would have input my token to connect it to my Pingdom instance. And it will save to my Pingdom account, and I will show that as soon as this flow is completed. Here we go. It's popped up, and you saw that little portion. It popped up really quickly. I'd already put in my token, and I can save this as my SAM free trial flow. Once that is saved, I could come into my Pingdom account here, refresh the page, and then the transaction section of the tool. I'm on the wrong account. Sorry about that, guys. Transactions. And down at the bottom of the page, we can see that the SAM free trial flow is now inside of my Pingdom instance. From this point, the only thing I'd have to do is configure who I want to be alerted, how often I want to be alerted on, or how often I want to check. I want to check this every 5 minutes. I can select the regions, as Lee mentioned earlier. Pingdom has over 100 probes all around the globe, and they're broken up into different regions. So I can select which region I want this check to be checked from. I'm going to leave this in East US. I can set up my alert settings. I can send it to whoever is associated. Maybe there are different teams at your organization that need to be alerted about different things. I can select the teams that are associated with this particular check. I have a few different items that I can alter with my alerting. And then I could also maybe add it to my Slack channel. Whenever this check goes down, it's important enough. I want a larger team, maybe my dev team, to know that this check has failed. Once I've modified that check, it's going to be up and running. And as soon as that first check completes, my status will turn to green or red, whichever. If the flow is broken, it would turn red. If it's available, it'll turn green, and it will be in my list of transaction checks here. So that's just a really quick demo of how this will all work. You have the ability as WPM customers, once you have access to a Pingdom account, you can easily decide, do I want this check to be something that is done from an external perspective, really giving me that visibility from my customer's perspective? Or is it something that I want my employees? I want to be checking and making sure that my employees' interaction is working well. Based on that decision, I can either send it to Pingdom or I can send it to WPM and Orion. And then, so that's really the recorder piece of this and transaction checks. The transaction checks are very similar from WPM and Pingdom. I'm going to just jump into one of our existing transaction checks since that other one hasn't run yet, just to give you an example of the type of data that you can see inside of the Pingdom transaction checks. So as you can see, we have the different steps and the wait times associated with each of those steps for that flow. And then I have my log history of every check that's been run against this test. If I ever encounter an error, we do a root cause analysis to tell you which step is failing, as well as the received content and just that additional information to help you really troubleshoot why is that check failing. So very similar to what you see in WPM. Again, the main difference here is, do I want to be doing this from an external perspective versus an internal perspective? All right. And with that, I'm going to move on to talk a little bit more about our real user monitoring. But before I do that, I just want to talk about synthetic monitoring as a whole in Pingdom. With WPM, you're used to transaction checks, that flow that we just went through. Pingdom also has the capability to do uptime checks, so simple pings, and these simple pings can be done on email servers, they can be done on network devices, anything that has a public IP address. Pingdom can check that it's available and send you details on the response time of it. Then we also have a different feature called page speed checks. This you might see a little bit of similarity between some of what the transaction checks in WPM can do, but it's a slightly different purpose. So here we're looking at a single URL, not multiple steps. And I can go into that specific URL and I want to say, how is that page performing and how can that page performance be optimized? So here it gives you a high-level status. It's going to give you page load over time. It'll give you film strip. If you had screenshots of the website, it would show you how the site loads. And then you also have what you might be familiar with in WPM as the waterfall charts. We have that here as well that just breaks down those particular elements that are loading on the page and why the different elements are loading at the pace that they are. One additional feature from WPM for this purpose is also the grade. It's grading the performance of the page, and as you click into these reports, it's going to give you a lot more detail on why that page is performing, is getting the grade that it is, and how you might actually be able to optimize it. So those are just a few additional features that Pingdom has on their synthetic monitoring side of the house. And now I'm going to move over to real user monitoring. Also, it's called Visitor Insights inside Pingdom. Pardon me. So here we are in Visitor Insights, or also known as our real user monitoring. At this high level, we're monitoring two different sites. We're monitoring this Pingdom Live map, and we're trying to monitor Salesforce, a Salesforce instance, but nobody has added the snippet of code to the Salesforce site, so we're not collecting any data on it at the moment. But for Pingdom Live map, we have submitted a little snippet of code into the header or footer of that site, which is now collecting data from real users to Pingdom Live map. Here we're just getting a really high-level description of the active sessions, load times. This is what's happening on my website now. But I can drill in and get a deeper level of understanding of who's coming to my site, how are they getting there, really what is the performance that they're experiencing while they're on the site. So here again, we have that high-level overview of what's happening on the site right now. I can look and I can see my map. Okay, well, I can see a lot of my customers that are in North America, they're having really good load times. But once I get in and I look at the Ukraine, oh my gosh, I really need to do something there to optimize that experience for those folks in Ukraine. If I have a really large customer base there, I want to make sure that they're getting a better experience than red, right? That wouldn't be optimal for, I mean, that's a 12-second load time there happening in Ukraine. And we all know that based on industry standards, people expect the load time to happen in between 2 and 3 seconds. That's where a lot of the SLAs are set for this type of thing. Based on people's attention span. They have lots of places they could be, and they want that performance. They expect that performance to be good, or they'll just leave you. Additionally, we'd see how they're coming to our websites, which platforms they're using, which browsers they're using. We have the countries over here. And we also have this thing called AppDeck. So really what I like to think of AppDeck as is customer satisfaction. So people visiting our site, are they generally going to be satisfied, or are they going to be frustrated? So as we mentioned before, we saw in Ukraine, that was going to be a really frustrating experience. These are set on industry standard benchmarks of what would be acceptable versus satisfying and frustrated, but users also have the ability to go in and change them to what works for their organization. The site that we're monitoring only has one page, but if it had multiple pages, we could see who was visiting what page. We could adjust it based on page views or on median load time, or whatever grouping is important to you. You could organize those top pages from that order. If you had multiple pages associated with the same thing, maybe you had a blog and you just wanted to group that together and judge that performance, you can group those pages together here under Manage Groups. And then we start getting into some of the more metrics-driven information about how these different items are performing over time from different perspectives, right? Overall geography of platform, we have the page views, again, broken down by all of these different components. And we were just in the experience piece, but we can also get into general performance. So we have the load time based on states and based on pages. In this section, we also have time to first byte. So really, again, when can they start interacting with my page? This is going to be absolutely critical when talking about people's satisfaction with my site and propensity to bounce on the site. We have a few more pieces of information down to the page views. And we can also, if you're familiar with SolarWinds AppOptics, this is where we would also be able to go over and link over to AppOptics to maybe see how are the sessions going associated with this application, and sort of some back-end metrics on the infrastructure that's helping to support this application as well. One great thing about this section of our product is these are very dynamic. You can slice and dice this information a million different ways. So you can do it by the pages, platforms, browsers, countries, timeline, whatever you want to do, it all works. And you can also share it with people outside your company, and they would be able to do the dynamic filtering as well. You wouldn't need to log in to be able to see that information. And with that, that's a high-level overview of our real user monitoring capability that's available inside of Pingdom. We like to talk about holistic monitoring as, you have your synthetic checks. This really helps you understand, I need to know when this page or when this site stops performing. Even if people aren't on that site, I want to know if that stops working. Then you have your real user monitoring, which is really going to tell you more about who is coming, where are they visiting, what's their experience like right now. This will help inform you in creating your synthetic checks. Okay, well, I see that this page is getting a lot of hits. I didn't realize how critical that was to my business. I need to make sure that that page is always up and running. Because, when we do synthetic checks, we know the pieces that are really important to our business, but are those pages also the ones that our users are using the most often? So real user monitoring can really give you that perspective and help fill in those blanks, and they can support each other from that perspective. The last thing I wanted to chat with you guys about today is the ability to see Pingdom data inside of your Orion instance. We know that as Orion customers, a large portion of what you like about it is it's a single pane of glass, right? And if I'm going to have this other tool, I really need that information to be connected into my into my Orion instance as well so that I have it in one place and I can help solve problems more quickly. Here, I'm on a Thwack post from one of our users that uses both Orion, SolarWinds, and Pingdom. And they have set up a Pingdom dashboard using the new Orion modern dashboards that came out in this latest release of 2020.2. Essentially what he did was he connected into our API, wrote a few scripts, and at the end of the day, he's able to display his Pingdom data inside of his Orion dashboard. It's on his homepage in the lower right-hand corner. I got to do a call with him. It was really neat to see that type of information inside of Orion. So I can put this link inside of the chat for the WebEx, and you guys can feel free to peruse that. But we also have another way that you can be entering your data into Orion. So let me just put this in the chat real fast. There you go. You can take a look at that when you have time. But the other mechanism, this is really just about reporting and seeing that information in the same dashboard. But what if you want to do things that are a little bit more actionable from your perspective? So again, as I mentioned, Pingdom has a really great API. We have this newest version. It's API 3.1. It's really super comprehensive for uptime monitoring. We're just getting into our transaction monitoring capabilities. We had our first release for transaction monitoring a little bit earlier this year. I think it came out in maybe March timeframe. But we're really looking to expand the scope of this so that people can connect and use Pingdom data in the ways that they want to use it and where they want to use it. So be on the lookout for more information coming from the Pingdom 3.1 API. This is accessible from our pingdom.com site. If you go to resources, it's the top link on the API there. But with that 2020.2 release, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of the SAM API polar templates. Let me just open another tab here. Let's just take a look at some of our applications we have. All right. So in this 2020.2 release, we came out with those polar templates. Let me just go to one of our sites here. I've heard from a couple of WPM users that one of the things they like to do with their WPM transactions is really to connect them to the node associated with the check that they're monitoring from. All of those pieces are related. If they're having a problem with a node, they want to know if their check is having a problem. If they're having a problem with the check, is there something going wrong with the node? The API polar templates are located here in the management section of any of your nodes. This could be, a server. This could be the application template itself. However you want to connect, it's totally up to you. With this release, I think on this page right here, this is the generic create your own API template. You can connect to the Pingdom API. You can get a response code. You can get the individual check ID. And by doing so, you're able to really make that metric a child contributor to your node status. So you could set benchmarks on your Pingdom data and alert through your Orion mechanisms and have that tell you about your node status, contribute to that node status by using these templates. This one is you can build it from scratch yourself, or if you go to the assign, you also have an out-of-the-box Pingdom template already ready for you for transaction checks. So you can also, again, if I have a transaction check that's related to external monitoring for a customer, I can build that transaction check into my alerting, into my node status, and really get that visibility from that external monitoring into my Orion instance. And really, you would just connect this through your Bearer token as well. This would just require you to go into Pingdom, create a token, add it in. I am on the Orion demo instance, so I won't be able to complete this transaction and show you what it looks like because I don't have permissions here. But the flow works, and you can test it out on your own time. So with that, those are really the high-level demo pieces that we talked about. We talked about the transaction recorder, how it works for both Pingdom and for for Pingdom and for WPM. We talked about real user monitoring capabilities. We talked to some about the little bit differences of the synthetic checks available in Pingdom and WPM. And then we also talked about how you can get that Pingdom data into your Orion instance. And with that, I think we have another poll. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll go back to the presentation. So we have a new poll that should be coming up here any second. I'm still seeing the old poll, but that's all right. If you need any additional information about Pingdom or would like a more in-depth demo of how these two things can work together, that's what the next poll should be showing you and how it can work. And with that, we're just going to move on to our Q&A.
Awesome. So if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and put it in the Q&A, and we'll just give a minute to collect some. I know we've got 2 minutes left. Okay, looks like somebody asked, as an active WPM customer, is there a charge to use Pingdom functionality?
Yes. So Pingdom is a separate tool. It's a subscription tool. So you will pay, you can purchase it monthly, you can purchase it annually. And the great thing about Pingdom is the pricing is super flexible. So depending on your needs, we have plans that start at $10 a month. So you could basically be doing 10 uptime checks. You could do 1 transaction check for $10 a month from the Pingdom side. So if you just have a few pieces of your applications or websites that you want to be monitoring from that external perspective, very affordable options for you out there. Good question.
Okay, looks like we have a RUM-specific question. It says, do you have to add each URL in RUM, or does a site cover all pages of, I guess, that site?
Yeah, so I think I understand the question. And if I don't get this right, please feel free to add a clarifying comment there. But yeah, with that snippet of code that I was mentioning before, it's a little bit of JavaScript. Once you put that into the header or footer of your website, it will automatically sort of crawl your site and it will deploy that to each piece of the site. So you're not going to have to set up real user monitoring for each page of your site that you want to monitor. It's just going to do it all from that one snippet of code. All right, and I think we're actually out of time. So if there are any additional questions that didn't get answered, if you put them in the chat, we'll be sure to get those answered for you after the call. We also recorded this. You should be receiving a follow-up email so that if you want to review any of the information, you'll be able to do so at your leisure. And we hope to hear from you soon, and hope you can explore Pingdom a little bit more and see how it can benefit you as a WPM user as well. Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, everyone.